Alright, what's going on, guys? It's your boy British, the JJK tuber you can bring home to mom. I got some wholesome content for you today, but before the video gets underway, don't forget to drop a like.
少なは腕が4本あるんだ。
As we take our first steps into the new year, we try to move past the traumatic events of 2020.
There's not one single beacon of hope.
Luckily, there's one television anime that's making shonen great again.
I just like to watch my favorite anime, Jujutsu Kaisen, and read manga.
It's the #1 show on Netflix Japan, 2 months strong, ending the reign of Demon Slayer, and is Mal's most popular anime of 2020. Jujutsu Nation is thriving, and everything is perfect.
Jujutsu Kaisen fans, I think, are a little overbearing. They're a little too bloodthirsty. They're a little too quick to say, this series is the greatest of all time.
It is. Part of what establishes Mahito as a great antagonist by the end of the Junpei arc is how you can feel the animosity between him and Yuji. Following their fight, Mahito states that he wants nothing more than to kill Yuji Itadori. And in the manga, it's clear this feeling has him physically shaking, while we see Yuji's hatred for Mahito only grow as the series progresses. And Yuji isn't typically a hateful dude, so the fact that he hates Mahito really speaks volumes. And the biggest contributor to that is obviously the tragedy of Junpei. There's also a side to their beef that comes from a more visceral dislike of what the other party embodies, as they hold ideals that are exactly opposite, ideals that we're made aware of practically from their introduction. Yuji believes everyone deserves to die a natural death, that life is precious and that you simply shouldn't kill, while Mahito holds a nihilistic point of view and believes that life holds no meaning and has no value. These polar opposite and conflicting worldviews would end up playing tug of war for Junpei's soul in the events leading up to his untimely demise. Near the end, Junpei believed he was so hated and had been so persecuted that even his own family had been targeted. And it's Mahito that makes him believe that. But why was Junpei so easy to manipulate? Although Mahito ended up lying and betraying Junpei, Mahito was very upfront and accepting of him at the start. Unlike Junpei's classmates, who wear a mask for teachers and commit atrocities behind closed doors.
These are high school fucking bullies!
It was that openness that allowed Mahito to easily gain Junpei's trust and deceive him. Also, Junpei agreed with a lot of what Mahito was saying, and that made him want to believe him. When you take a kid like Junpei, who's picked on by students and ignored by teachers, and he's introduced to a supernatural entity, i.e. Mahito, who eliminates 3 of Junpei's bullies like it's nothing, and says, yeah, you should kill people, it's totally chill. Also, have some powers so no one can mess with you anymore. Junpei's like, I fuck with this guy, I like what he's saying.
He turns himself into a pickle. Funniest shit I've ever seen.
I'm Pickle Rick!
All sorts of negative emotions flow out of humans, and as it gathers, it gives birth to curses. But Mahito specifically says he was born from the hatred between humans. So the negative emotions Junpei feels towards humanity, from the humiliation and the abandonment, and overall believing people are heartless, all that shape Junpei's worldview are the very same emotions that Mahito was born from. And this is why Mahito thinks nothing of people. But being born from that hatred, Mahito is a hyper-intelligent curse that's extremely curious and calculating, while being equally ruthless. He's constantly learning and growing, like he's sort of a young curse compared to Jogo and company, and Mahito's childlike personality reflects that. His curse technique is transfiguration, allowing him to manipulate the size and shape of the soul by touching it. And because the shape of the body is dependent on that of the soul, when Mahito manipulates the soul, the body follows suit. He can also use this technique on his own soul as well, altering his form, though there are limitations like how small or large he can manipulate a soul. But he gets a ton of practice with this, even showing Junpei the different ways he's experimented on humans with his powers. To Mahito, humans are just playthings, and in the end, Junpei was no different. The two of them did click, but Mahito is not capable of love, respect, or admiration as he likes to pretend. Then Junpei meets Yuji.
見えてるな。
On one hand, befriending Sukuna's vessel sealed the fate of Junpei's mother.
マヤー！
On the other hand, Yuji, a
お前ら！
Junpei's
お前ら！
mother. as he got wrapped into Mahito and Geto's plan to bring Sukuna over to their side. But since meeting Mahito, Junpei was set to go down a dark path anyway, as he was gonna murder his teacher in broad daylight if Yuji didn't appear when he did. And it wasn't until Junpei got to know Yuji where it seemed like there could be another way. However, it was too late, as he was already in the palm of Mahito's hand. The greatest manipulation was done at Junpei's moment of peak vulnerability. The only person Junpei loved was his mother, and Mahito, who was never capable of love, took that, taking the one thing that set Junpei apart from him.
Go to the fucking Wendy's, dope. Before I turn this whole ride upside down. You already made me late in one of my man's crib. Bugging out.
Junpei's curse technique allows him to summon a jellyfish shikigami called Moondregs. The aquatic shikigami is a callback to when Junpei's mother referred to his school as a small aquarium. Moondregs creates a poison from curse energy that it can release through its tendrils, while its size and the potency of its poison are determined by the abilities of the user. And like many other shikigami, it rushes to protect its master, as it covers Junpei and uses its squishy exterior to easily take hits from Yuji. With the help of Mahito, Junpei was able to develop this technique in almost no time at all compared to a normal sorcerer, but it wasn't long before Mahito decided that Junpei had outlived his worth.
The way he leaps off of rooftops and flips backwards to face the camera before falling into a headfirst dive is just full of the exaggerated swagger of a black teen.
Witnessing Junpei's death of course scarred Yuji. Befriending Junpei was like a return to normalcy for him after leaving his school life and friends behind to become a sorcerer. But after one bad mission is now kept in hiding, presumed dead by the higher-ups, as well as his sorcerer comrades. Yuji came so close to saving Junpei by refusing to continue their fight, and overall reminding him that humans do have hearts. Upon learning about the death of Junpei's mother, Yuji invites him to Jujutsu Tech, and even vowing he'd help bring whoever killed Junpei's mother to justice. But after watching Junpei get transfigured and die, Yuji snaps.
I'm about to get racist.
This is when we realize though Yuji is not more powerful than Mahito, he is a bad matchup for him. Cause Itadori is Sukuna's vessel, in his body resides two souls, so he's naturally learned how to perceive the outlines of the soul. So he's one of the only people who can damage Mahito's soul directly to weaken him. Also, Sukuna makes him immune to being transfigured by Mahito. This is a massive edge for Yuji, but Mahito is still a formidable curse, even among special grades, and he doesn't need to transfigure Yuji to kill him. Yuji charges Mahito, who's able to adapt and stay out of his range. Once he finally gets his hands on Mahito, it turns out to only be a clone, showing that Mahito was in control all along. And this is when Nanami arrives and enters the fight.
I do think the age of consent should be 13 years.
Earlier in his confrontation with Mahito, Nanami was able to damage Mahito's body, but instead of healing through reverse curse technique like most special grades, Mahito fixes the damage by restoring the shape of his soul, which his technique allows. And it wasn't long before Mahito was able to lay his hand on Nanami in the most brief of moments, leaving Nanami with considerable damage, who then has to pull out all the stops just to survive this encounter, revealing a binding vow known as Overtime, which increases Nanami's curse energy after spending over 40 hours in a week on the clock for Jujutsu High, then activating his second binding vow, showing one's cards, that boosts his curse energy after divulging the details of his curse technique. Then he uses a curse technique extension called Collapse, which allows his ratio technique to find the weakness in a structure and dismantle it in a single hit. Nanami slices off Mahito's leg before collapsing a large stone wall, barely escaping with his injuries. But unless you can attack Mahito's soul directly, he can continue to restore his body without weakening, so he came out of the fight relatively unharmed. But now facing off against the power and experience of Nanami, with the talent of Yuji Itadori, given an edge by Sukuna, Mahito desperately tries to regain control of the situation.
They jumping me! They jumping me!
He then releases transfigured humans to attack Yuji, exploiting his weakness. Yuji won't kill humans, even though a human transfigured by Mahito really just wants to die at that point. When Yuji is forced to knowingly kill those transfigured humans, he has to kill off a piece of himself, that part that strives to make sure that everyone can die a natural death, those core beliefs. The part of Yuji that held on to that died that day. Nanami tried to let him know that making sure everyone dies a natural death isn't realistic, even knowing Yuji would still try. Yuji clung on to that innocence, and Mahito took that from him as well. As the fight wages on, Mahito reveals his domain expansion, self-embodiment of perfection. Within a domain expansion, all curse techniques hit their target, but since Mahito's technique requires he touch an opponent to affect them, this domain focuses on putting them in the literal palm of Mahito's hand. He makes sure to only catch Nanami, intentionally keeping Sukuna's vessel out of the way.
Let me in. Let me in.
Trapped inside the domain, Nanami begins to accept his death. After leaving sorcery behind, Nanami became obsessed with money and retiring early. He was living a very practical life, but not one of true fulfillment. He'd frequent a bakery ran by a young woman that helped sustain him in his day-to-day life, all while the girl's physical health is declining due to a curse she cannot see and has no knowledge of. The work and pay of a baker is by no means glamorous, but they exist for a greater purpose, just like Jujutsu sorcerers. This realization led Nanami to reach out to Gojo and return to sorcery, because even though he doesn't like Jujutsu sorcerers, or a lot of things, he's aware of the greater purpose they serve. And whether we want to believe we have a greater purpose or not, many of us have a gift, or have a passion, or just conscious enough to do the right thing. And I think that's why we love Nanami, because he has that cold exterior that represents how tired and fed up we all are, while simultaneously having a heart of gold. He appeals to our realism, while also our beliefs that people are good, and we can find meaning even in the money.
Would you like to try the big rip today?
Or Shamrock Shake.
Oh yeah, you want that all the way? Whipped cream?
You're fucking with my head right now.
Are you okay?
Nope.
The moment Yuji busts in to save Nanami, there isn't like strategy involved, because domains are pretty easy to get into but very difficult to escape from. As Yuji enters Mahito's domain, which touches the soul of anyone within, Sukuna in his own innate domain faces Mahito directly and delivers a direct attack on his soul, which Mahito cannot quickly recover from. As Yuji moves in to deliver the kill, Mahito literally pulls a perfect cell, and then escaping back into the sewers where the sorcerers lose track of him. As Mahito lies weakened in the sewer, all he can think about is how badly he wants to kill Yuji Itadori. Yuji's soul already died that day, but unlike the body, the soul can be killed repeatedly, and that's how Mahito wants to make Itadori suffer. To Mahito, Yuji is not only someone who is immune to his core technique, but is also the very first person to foil his plans. The one thing Nanami expressed that he didn't like about Jujutsu sorcerers is that they're expected to be willing to die for their comrades, and Yuji exemplified that exact notion when he saved Nanami. As they discuss the events that transpired, Nanami urges Yuji not to die in his effort to save everyone he comes across, because there's still going to be people that will need him, as Nanami finally acknowledges Yuji Itadori as a Jujutsu sorcerer.
A guy wearing a skirt, such femboy, much kawaii. Nuzzles your bulgy woolgy.
And that concludes my coverage of the Mahito or Junpei arc. I thank you guys very much for watching. It's been really real. I'll talk to you in the next one. Peace.
I was out of control down that only road with in the fast lane. Found me all on my own and you got involved like you wanna crash me. Got me back and reset it, for that I'm indebted for even the small things. Don't mind fucking up a check as long as you said I make this shit my calling.